Hey everyone, it's Brendan, aka Project Bean Studios, and first off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone who watched my Robin fan film and for all the positive reactions to the movie. It really means a lot to me because that project took way too long for me to make, and I was just so happy to get that out into the world before 2019 ended. Now, I figured for the future of this channel, I would use this platform to practice my writing skills, and since I'm practically a film addict, I figured I would talk about just that. Films that I like, love, hate, etc. Every once in a while, I might stray away from movies and talk about something else, but for the most part, I'm going to stick to that subject. So I thought for my first video essay, I would talk about a movie that I think deserves more love, and that is 2018's Bumblebee. Following his directorial debut, Kubo and the Two Strings, Travis Knight's sophomore effort Bumblebee is the sixth installment in the live-action Transformers franchise, making it the first to not be directed by Michael Bay, though he's still attached as the movie's producer. The film is Paramount's obvious attempt to begin a cinematic universe similar to Marvel and DC. The film also serves as an excuse to explore the origin of arguably the series' most recognizable character next to Optimus Prime. I mean, honestly, if you were to tell me that they were going to be making a series of spin-offs for the Transformers, I can't think of anyone better to do that with than Bumblebee. I think it's safe to say that after Michael Bay's first Transformers film, the popularity of the character skyrocketed. Not that he wasn't in other Transformers media before then, but it didn't seem like he was the household name that he is today. The other thing that this spin-off allows for is it allows the franchise to be taken in a new direction. One of my biggest complaints about the previous films is that while I enjoyed the first movie just fine, nothing much is added to the sequels to keep it fresh or new to audiences. It just seems like it's always the same repetitive action, the same annoying and shallow characters, the same confusing world-ending plot, the same painfully unfunny humor, and on top of that, the same locations. I swear, every fight in those films takes place in either a city or a desert. Sometimes both. However, when the first trailer for Bumblebee came out, I was actually pretty stoked, mostly because it didn't open like previous Transformers trailers did.
Let me tell you something. A driver don't pick the car. Car pick the driver.
It has been said through the ages, without sacrifice, there can be no victory.
See what I mean? One presents itself as a hopeful 80s-like fantasy film, and the other comes across like it's going to be the darkest chapter in the franchise that's meant to look like a big deal, when really, it's just gonna feature stuff we've seen a million times before. Or, worse, crap like this.
What are we gonna do with this shrimp taco?
Just bump a cap in his ass, throw him in the truck, and then nobody gonna know nothing, not me.
Huh? Who wants some chicken dinner now, bitch? Cause somebody messed with the wrong way today.
Move, bitch, get out of my way. Move, bitch, get out of my way.
Okay.
On top of, clearly a change in tone, the character designs also got me excited. It seemed like they really wanted to make it up to G1 fans by giving all the Transformers a more classic look. And with all this intrigue I had regarding the movie, I was also shocked when I saw that this was the best reviewed Transformers movie ever, which only made me more happy because it looked like we had a real winner on our hands. So, 3 weeks after the movie's initial release, I finally sat down to watch it in theaters, and I thought it was okay. Just okay. Yeah, truth be told, I didn't really think much of it at first. I knew I liked it and that I was able to tolerate it much more than the previous movies. It certainly had a lot more personality, but structurally, it just felt like every kid/teen meets creature story that we've seen before. In fact, you can practically pinpoint which films those are just by watching certain scenes. Films like E.T., The Extraterrestrial, The Iron Giant, How to Train Your Dragon, Harry and the Hendersons, etc. Instead of being something new or different, it just felt like another film stuck in a familiar place. However, despite this, a part of me just couldn't stop thinking about the movie. So why was that? Well, I didn't get a chance to see the film again until it got released on home media. It was then when I realized that the familiarity actually benefits the film more than diminishes it. So let's talk about why this film works in so many ways. I think it's going to be impossible for me to review this movie without talking about the film's opening, so let's discuss that first. The opening battle on Cybertron is simply orgasmic. Even as someone who didn't grow up watching the original Transformers series, or heck, that many Transformers cartoons, the more I think about it, it was absolutely refreshing to see the Autobots and the Decepticons looking and sounding like their cartoon counterparts. But they're not just straight-up 3D models of the cartoon designs either. They still have the same silhouette as the original and the same geometric shapes, but they have much more realistic textures, joints, and little details hidden within them to make them blend in more with reality.
We're simplifying and squaring things out like the toy, and it conjures up that G1 aesthetic.
Every detail we could get off the cartoon, we applied to the characters.
There is still some alien tech within them, but not to the point where they look unrecognizable. Optimus Prime looks like Optimus Prime. Starscream looks like Starscream. RC looks like RC. Even freaking Soundwave looks and sounds like he did in the original cartoon.
Alert! Alert! Autobots escaping! Decepticons! Attack! Soundwave acknowledges. Pursue her. Retrieve it.
Unlike the Bay films, they don't look like weird, twisted alien meshes that are so complicated I'm not really sure what I'm looking at. The designs in Travis Knight's Bumblebee are kept rather simpler and more aesthetically pleasing, which, quite frankly, I prefer. And on top of that, the battle itself is also a lot of fun. There is a lot going on in the scene, but never to the point where you can't make anything out. Not to mention, it isn't taking place in another desert or a city. At least, not on Earth. And the visual effects themselves actually look really good too. I also really like this new design they gave to Bumblebee. The body itself is simpler and classic, but the face is much more closer to the Bay films, with some slight alterations. The head is a bit of a different shape, the eyes are larger and more expressive, giving him this almost puppy dog-like face, which works given the idea that he himself is like a lost puppy on Earth. I mean, come on people, how can you not see the resemblance here? Overall, what else can I say about this intro that more than likely hasn't been said already? I'm sure a lot of classic Transformers fans were able to appreciate this scene.
Sorry I'm late, hit a little traffic.
But okay, so the Transformers themselves look and sound amazing, but what about the human characters? Now, just because a film is called Transformers doesn't mean it'll only star Transformers. There needs to be some human characters to bounce off of them. And the human characters in the Michael Bay films, well, more so in the later installments, ranged from being meh to insufferable. It never really seemed like the characters went through any arc, or at least none that I could follow or really care about, so I honestly had no attachment to them. And isn't that kind of the point of having the humans in a Transformers movie? To have a compelling human character to go along the journey with because, like them, you've never had to face anything like this? Okay, in all fairness, I'm not asking for the most developed characters on the planet, but simply ones that are likable and that I have no problems with following throughout the film. Thankfully in this, we do get that. There are a lot more characters in the film, but I figured I would mostly discuss two, that being Agent Burns and Charlie Watson. Let's start with Agent Burns, played by none other than
John Cena!
What? You think I let an opportunity like that pass? Pfft, of course not. I'm not above resurrecting a dead meme. Okay, in all seriousness, I think John Cena plays the part of Agent Burns very well. He has a command and force that most military leaders in these films do, but I would argue he's much more memorable and charismatic than those previous versions.
You're right. I'm sorry. Ow! That one was on me. That's a malfunctioning trigger. This weapon is just faulty. Someone is gonna get a talking to when they...
He balances the strong leader aspects while also being incredibly hilarious at times, just showcasing his comedic abilities, which, yeah, John Cena has proven time and time again that he can do.
You're not about that life, champ. I can see it.
Oh, I am about that life. No, I will get crazy up in here. You like movies? We'll make a movie.
Oh, God.
We'll make Mama Say Knock You Out, starring my fist in your dick hole. No, maybe not. They're best friends. They're just saying, like, you're okay with me. You're okay to me. You're okay to me.
What's your favorite food?
What's my favorite food? Well, if I were to have Nicole stand up this time, I couldn't show you.
I mean, the guy manages to take scenes that typically wouldn't be that funny, and yet somehow makes them work.
No, don't run! Do not run! She ran.
I'm actually kind of curious to know just how much of his lines were scripted and how much was actually by Cena himself. There are moments where he just speaks what should be on everyone's mind.
They literally call themselves Decepticons. That doesn't set off any red flags?
Enough!
So yeah, John Cena manages to make a lot of this film work for me. Though not as much as the one who interacts with the title character the most, Charlie Watson, played by Hailee Steinfeld. Okay, how do I put this? Hailee Steinfeld is one of my favorite actors/actresses currently working today, and I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. I've loved her ever since her breakout role in True Grit, and I'm really glad she's only grown further as an actress and an artist since then. On top of that, she's also multi-talented, balancing a career in music as well as being on film and TV. And yes, as an actress, she has a lot of range. Don't believe me? Let me list every type of role she's done. Hailee has been many things, including a bloodthirsty girl out for revenge, a star-crossed lover, being pitch perfect while being barely lethal, a girl who is only fine on the outside, a teenager who learns to not sweat the small stuff, the definition of the word adorkable, the living embodiment of, well, regular adorable.
Oh, he's scared. It's okay, I'll protect him.
Being the most winsome woman alive, a spider person from another dimension, a common fungus, a female poet, and of course, single-handedly dismantling any man who says that she is not like most girls.
You're just not like most girls.
I gotta go.
I'm about to end this man's whole career. Boom, bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
Okay, but let's be honest, Hailee, you are not like most girls. Most girls don't make my heart skip a beat. Okay, I'm sure I missed a lot, but yeah, she's been a lot of things. She is also a master of tone. I swear, whatever script she gets, she manages to perfectly encapsulate that character to give the proper performance needed. And okay, I'm not gonna act like Charlie Watson's the most complex character ever written, but she is far more interesting than the female characters from previous movies. I know this isn't always a guarantee, but maybe this is a benefit of having a woman writing the script, in this case, Christina Hodson. Most of the women in the Transformers movies have had little to no personality outside of looking stunningly gorgeous. And no, I'm not saying beautiful female characters can't be interesting, but if they have nothing much to offer outside of being eye candy, it's going to get tiresome very quickly. So, how do they make Charlie Watson interesting? They give her human-like faults. She has insecurities, fears, desires, but at the end of the day, she's still determined to help out her new friend. Her father died long before we first meet her, and she struggles to cope with the loss of him, shutting people out and keeping mostly to herself, but never to the point where she's just a stick in the mud. When Bumblebee enters the picture, he manages to help Charlie be more open and confront her fears, something that is resolved in the movie's climax. It was honestly the first time I felt like we had a fully defined, likable character in a Transformers movie. On top of all this, I actually like how she doesn't really present herself like all the other women in the past films. Like I said before, the female characters in the Bayformers series have had little to no personality other than being beautiful, which, if I'm being honest, it's kind of hard for Hailee to not be. I mean, come on, look at her. But instead, her hair is more messy, there isn't a whole lot of foundation added to her face, and she wears less feminine clothes, dressing more tomboyish as well as having darker colors than the other teenage girls in the film, which really only works more for the character in my opinion.
Oh, me? Who am I? Oh, I'm Charlie. Charlie Watson.
So, now that we've discussed the Transformers and the human characters, let's talk about what really makes this movie work, its heart. And to me, that heart wouldn't be as good if it wasn't placed in one of the craziest decades to ever live, that being the 1980s. I know there are a few exceptions to this, but if there's one thing I can take away from this movie, and intellectual property-based films in general, is that when you have a fan of the source material work on a project based on said intellectual property, it can make a big difference. Something I've noticed between director Travis Knight and Michael Bay is that Knight has a lot of passion behind what he wanted to bring regarding the characters in the story. Watching him in interviews, it's very clear that he's a fan of the original series and that he wanted to create something that his inner child would appreciate.
Well, I think the thing that's always been interesting about Bumblebee as a character in the films is that he's clearly the Autobot. He's clearly the Transformer that has the most affinity for humanity. He's the one who has the deepest connection with humans. And I think that's fascinating. Why is that? What is it about us that he finds interesting? What is it about him that forges such a deep connection with us? And so one of the things that we're able to do in this movie is to explore how that happened, how he was able to do that. What is it about him that is able to connect with us so deeply, and what's unique about him? Being able to take the time in a film where it's not filled with dozens and dozens of awesome robots, but it's just this one character that we're able to focus in on and figure out, what does he think? How does he feel? What makes him tick? I love exploring characters, and that's what we do in this film. We really get to understand who Bumblebee is and why people should and do love him.
Bay, on the other hand, mostly discusses the advances in technology used to make the film, as opposed to the direction of where to take the characters and the plot.
This is the first movie to use IMAX 3D digital camera, and it's this $1 million camera. It's very compact, shoots beautiful imagery, and a lot of movies that are 3D nowadays, it's an afterthought, and this was created for 3D, the entire movie. And we shot it in 3D. Most movies nowadays don't shoot in 3D. They convert it later. It's a post-production process. But when you shoot it in 3D, it just makes it way richer. And the way to see this movie is in IMAX 3D.
And whenever he does talk about the characters, he never quite goes into detail regarding their journey throughout the film or why the actors work for those specific roles in the way that Knight does.
I was working with Hailee Steinfeld as the lead of my film, and it was just kind of, those ideas were right there from the moment I read the script. And she is a marvel. She's astonishing. I mean, she really is so incredibly, extraordinarily talented. She can do anything, and she breaks your heart. She makes you laugh. There's always something interesting happening on her face. You can tell that there's just the brain, the wheels are always turning. She's just incredible. She's an exceptional actress, and she really is the heart and soul of this movie.
And Mark's a movie star, and he doesn't have a franchise, and we worked on Pain and Gain together, and he said, I'd love to do a Transformers with you. So that's kind of how it all sparked together. Well, he's a movie star. He gave it a real gravitas. I don't know, he's just, he really grounds a movie.
Don't get me wrong, there's nothing bad with talking about the effects or the technology used to make your movie. However, my point in bringing this up is that this is not what advances a franchise forward. You have to bring a change of pace to the series if you're going to keep the audience's interest, such as setting the film in a year other than present day. And what better time to set the story in than in 1987, 3 years after the original cartoon debuted. Okay, to be honest, setting this movie in the 80s, especially now, isn't really anything new, and there are the usual 80s references to remind you of what decade you're in, which, yeah, I know for some can be grating. Things like mentioning the Cold War, let's see, Alf gets referenced a couple times, and not to mention there's a picture of Ronald Reagan framed in the background of one scene. On the other hand, Knight wanted to bring a sense of wonder and joy that many classic films from the 80s had, so it's set in that time period to help reflect that tone.
And as I was discussing it with Lorenzo de Bonaventura, the producer, he had mentioned Amblin as something of a touchstone, and for me, that was ringing all the right bells. I was a child of the 80s. I grew up loving those classic Spielbergian coming-of-age tales, all things Amblin, that essentially defined my childhood. And to be able to tell that kind of a story, to be able to take this big, expansive franchise, this huge canvas that Michael and the team have built over the last decade, and to focus in on a tiny, tiny corner of that canvas and tell something that's more intimate, more character-driven, and more evocative of those great classic coming-of-age stories of the 80s, that was something that was really exciting to me.
Speaking of which, there's also the coming-of-age aspect that we should get into. I've already mentioned all the sci-fi and fantasy films that this is similar to, but I haven't gone into how similar it is to an 80s teen dramedy, most notably those from John Hughes. We've come a long way since the old days of The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, but even to this day, coming-of-age stories are becoming more common than ever. Heck, one of these modern coming-of-age stories is actually what landed Hailee Steinfeld the lead role in this film to begin with. So why is this all important, and why bring this subgenre of film into something like Bumblebee? Well, it's been a crazy few years since I graduated, but one thing that I can say about high school is that it's a crazy time for oneself. Easy for some and difficult for others. It can be a time to figure out what you want to do with your life, who you are, and find love and experience new things. Overall, it can be a time for discovery, or in Charlie's case, rediscovery.
Everyone in this family is trying to be happy, and all you want to do is make things harder.
You know, Mom, just because you've moved on and you're happy with your new life doesn't mean I have. You found a replacement for my dad, and I haven't, okay? And I never will. So I'm sorry if that makes things harder, but in 10 months from now, you won't even have to deal with me.
Charlie at the beginning has lost a lot of motivation in her life due to her father's passing. She seems disinterested in being around her family. She's afraid to high dive due to the personal memories that activity held. And she loses the will to fix her father's old car, which was one of the last things he left to her before dying.
I give up. I can't do this without you.
She's a lost soul, and it seems like it would be that way for a while. That is, of course, until she comes across the infamous yellow bot. Both her and Bumblebee are lost in different ways. Charlie isn't sure how to handle her father's passing, whereas Bee is unfamiliar with the planet Earth. Also, his memory core has been depleted, meaning he doesn't really remember much of where he came from. As Charlie begins to teach him more of Earth's customs, especially its music, she in turn gains an emotional connection with a living being, something that's been very difficult for her to do. As they grow closer with each other, she begins to be more open about her emotions, even sharing memories of when she was with her dad.
We used to work on this car every weekend together. It was our thing. That tape. That was the last time I saw him.
She never really had a friend like Bee before, and she's willing to do anything she can to protect him. The same can be said for Bumblebee. Emotional characters like this are something you would see very often in a classic 80s teen dramedy.
She has this beautiful journey of really finding who she is and what makes her happy and what she has to live for. And early on, we meet her and we find out that she lost her dad, and her dad was her best friend, and her dad was her ticket to everything. It was her ticket to freedom because he taught her how to work on a car, and a car meant freedom. And that's what they did together. That was their thing. And there was a very special, unique relationship there. And when she lost it, she lost part of herself. And so this movie is basically a journey of her finding that missing piece. And she finds it, and that happens to be a robot by the name of Bumblebee.
When Bee comes along, it's almost like finding a puppy who needs her and needs looking after. She is kind of forced to open her heart to him. She kind of has closed her heart after the death of her dad, and you can see it with her friends where she's kind of shut herself off a little bit. And Bee, because he's broken down and rusty and doesn't know what he's doing and can't speak, the fact that he needs her forces her to open her heart to him, forces her to take care of him, and in taking care of him, she kind of heals herself.
Honestly, one of the most heartfelt and thoughtful moments in the film is the goodbye scene between Charlie and Bee. I mean, the goodbye itself is decent enough, but there's one particular moment in the scene that just tugs at my heartstrings every time. Once Bumblebee heads out on his own, we get a shot of the car mirror with the words, "Objects in mirror are closer than they appear," with Charlie's reflection in the distance, symbolizing that despite leaving each other, they will always be a part of one another and that they're always going to be close to each other. And, oh God, it's just so heartbreaking and just so thoughtful. Something that hits me the most about this movie in general is that there have been times where I felt like I was in Charlie's shoes. As I said in the beginning of the video, my movie took a long time to make. I went through a long hiatus on it due to work, college, and not finding enough people in time. There was a point where I wanted to give up on it. I was tired of having the burden of organizing such a project that I just didn't want to look at it anymore. But then I thought about all of the trouble I took to write it, produce it, and even what I had filmed, and I said to myself, why should I give up now? I've wanted to make this for so long that it's pointless for me to stop. Charlie herself goes through a similar phase. She gives up her passion and is tired of holding on to the past, but it only took a certain something to reignite her life. In a way, I partly contribute the reignition for my movie on this.
Thank you for making me feel like me again.
80s teen films had similar setups too, with the main character or characters going on a journey of self-discovery in how they should handle life in a mature way. And I think that's what I love most about this movie. It's not so much a ripoff of those films, but rather an homage, a tribute if you will. In my opinion, I think there's just enough emotional weight and heart to consider it as more than just a movie similar to something else. I mean, if a film can make me feel for the main character in the way that I felt for Charlie, chances are it's doing something right. For that matter, if they do continue on with these spin-offs, why not combine genres? Like imagine if in Dark of the Moon, instead of only having the moon landing scene be at the beginning, the whole movie was based on this premise. Like all of it was about how Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin fought against Transformers on the moon. Yes, I know it's a ridiculous concept, but you're already rewriting history anyways, so why not go full force with the idea? Or maybe like in The Last Knight, you know how they had like scenes of them fighting in the days of King Arthur and World War II? Well, why not have 2 movies set around those concepts? Or even an entire movie set in the Jurassic period. By the way, this is like a kind of off-script moment, but apparently there's a Beast Wars movie in the works, so yeah, it looks like they may have unintentionally heard me or something? I don't know. Thank you, Paramount. But one can only hope if these ever truly get greenlit. As for this movie, is it groundbreaking or revolutionary? No, and I wouldn't say this is one of my personal favorite films either, and that I do have my issues with it. Does it deserve a sequel? Personally, I wouldn't mind. Wherever this leads the franchise, there is no denying that Bumblebee brought the Transformers back to life. Alrighty, and that was my first video essay on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking till the end. I know this video was kind of long, but I just had so much to say about this movie. If you enjoyed Bumblebee as much as I did, let me know in the comments below and what you would like to see in a future Transformers film. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, and if you want to be updated on any new videos that I make, be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Follow me on Twitter to get further updates, and while you're at it, follow me on Letterboxd too. Also, a quick shout out to a good friend and fellow YouTuber, Gwendolyn Jae Stone, who gave me some great advice on writing the script for this video. Please show her some love by checking out her videos and subscribing to her channel. The link will be in the description. I personally recommend her video on M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, so be sure to check that one out. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.